Some airplanes get cheaper simply because they age. Others lose value because buyers move toward newer designs, modern avionics, or aircraft that cost less to operate. But some aircraft keep dropping in price and still sit unsold. That does not mean they are bad airplanes. Many are highly capable, proven machines with excellent reputations. The real issue is ownership cost. Fuel burn, maintenance, engine reserves, insurance, aging systems, avionics upgrades, and having more aircraft than you actually need can all scare buyers away. Today we are looking at 15 aircraft that can become surprisingly affordable on the used market, yet remain difficult to sell. The asking price may look tempting, but the real question is simple. Can you afford everything that comes after the purchase? Number 15. Cessna 210 Centurion. The Cessna 210 Centurion is one of the best examples of why a falling aircraft price does not always mean the airplane itself has become less capable. This is a serious high-performance single that was designed for pilots who wanted more speed, more carrying ability, and more flexibility than a typical fixed-gear four-seat aircraft could provide. Later versions combine a powerful Continental engine with retractable landing gear, a spacious cabin, and six-seat capability, giving the 210 a level of cross-country usefulness that still makes it attractive today. What really makes the Centurion interesting is the combination of performance and practicality. You can carry passengers and baggage, travel long distances at a respectable cruise speed, and take advantage of the efficiency benefits of a clean, retractable design. Later turbocharged versions also give pilots the ability to operate more effectively at higher altitudes, making the aircraft particularly useful for longer trips and changing weather conditions. The problem is that all of this capability comes with complexity. Retractable landing gear, turbocharging on applicable models, sophisticated fuel systems, and decades-old airframes mean maintenance history becomes incredibly important. A cheap Cessna 210 can therefore look like an amazing deal at first glance, especially when compared with newer aircraft offering similar performance at much higher prices. Current asking prices vary enormously, with older examples sometimes appearing around the lower end of the market, while carefully restored or heavily upgraded aircraft can command well over $200,000. That huge price gap tells you something important. Buyers are not really paying for the model name alone. They are paying for the condition of the individual airplane. A lower-priced 210 may have older avionics, a tired interior, significant engine time, corrosion concerns, landing gear work ahead of it, or years of deferred maintenance. On the other hand, a well-maintained example with modern avionics, strong records, a healthy engine, and properly maintained landing gear can still be an extremely effective cross-country machine. Another advantage is that the 210 has a long production history and a large community of owners, mechanics, and specialists who understand the aircraft. That support matters when dealing with an older high-performance airplane. The biggest weakness is simply that there are many expensive systems to maintain, and one major repair can quickly erase the savings created by a low purchase price. That is why the Cessna 210 can keep getting cheaper without becoming easy to sell. The airplane itself is not obsolete. Its performance, useful load, retractable design, and six-seat flexibility remain valuable. What has changed is the buyer's calculation. Someone who understands the aircraft and finds a properly maintained example at the right price could get an impressive amount of capability for the money. But someone who buys the cheapest 210 available without understanding its maintenance history could quickly discover why the airplane was so cheap in the first place. Number 14. The Mooney M20J 201. This is one of those airplanes that can look almost too good for the money when you compare its performance with what older examples can cost today. Unlike larger aircraft such as the Cessna 210, the M20J 201 was designed around a much more focused idea: deliver strong cross-country speed and efficiency in a compact four-seat retractable single. Powered by a Lycoming IO360, the M20J became famous for getting impressive performance from a relatively modest engine, thanks largely to Mooney's clean aerodynamic design. The retractable landing gear, low-drag airframe, distinctive tail, and efficient wing all work together to reduce drag, allowing a properly maintained M20J to travel surprisingly quickly without the fuel consumption of many larger high-performance singles. That efficiency is one of the biggest reasons the airplane remains attractive decades after production ended. Older examples can now be found at prices that make them surprisingly tempting, especially when compared with newer aircraft offering similar cross-country capability. But the interesting question is why some of them can still remain on the market. The answer comes down to the type of buyer this airplane attracts. The Mooney is a specialized machine. It does not have the room of a larger six-seat single, and its compact cabin is clearly designed around efficiency rather than maximum passenger comfort. The airplane also rewards pilots who understand speed control and energy management, which can make it less appealing to buyers who simply want a relaxed, forgiving personal aircraft. Then there is the condition of the individual airplane. An inexpensive M20J can sometimes need avionics upgrades, fuel system work, engine attention, interior refurbishment, or other maintenance before it becomes the airplane the buyer really wants. That can quickly erase the advantage of a low purchase price. But find a well-maintained example with good records and a healthy engine, and the story changes completely. You get an aircraft with a remarkably efficient aerodynamic design, retractable gear, strong cross-country capability, and a reputation for doing more with less. The distinctive Mooney tail and streamlined fuselage also give it a character that separates it from the more conventional Cessna and Piper singles. This is what makes the M20J 201 so interesting in the used market. It may not offer the biggest cabin or the simplest ownership experience, but it can deliver an impressive combination of speed, efficiency, and value. The low price of some examples is not necessarily a warning that the airplane is ineffective. Sometimes it simply reflects a smaller buyer pool and the reality that many pilots do not fully understand what a properly maintained Mooney can do. For the right owner, that can turn an overlooked M20J into one of the more compelling bargains in the used aircraft market. Number 13. Piper Comanche 250. The Piper PA-24-250 Comanche is one of those aircraft that can make the used airplane market look almost backwards. This is a design from another era, yet much of what made it special still works remarkably well today. Introduced in the late 1950s, the Comanche was built around a clean, low-drag airframe, retractable landing gear, and a powerful Lycoming 0540 engine, giving it a combination of speed and efficiency that helped separate it from the more basic four-seat aircraft of its time. At around 155 knots in cruise while burning roughly 14 gallons per hour, the Comanche 250 can still offer impressive cross-country performance without the fuel appetite of many larger high-performance singles. That efficiency is one of the biggest reasons experienced Comanche owners remain so loyal to the airplane. Its distinctive aerodynamic design, relatively compact cabin, strong useful load, and retractable gear give it a character that newer aircraft do not always replicate. The landing gear is particularly interesting, with Piper using a mechanically linked retractable system that became one of the defining features of the PA-24. The airplane was also designed with long-distance flying in mind, giving pilots a surprisingly capable platform for personal transportation. So why can a Comanche 250 still be relatively inexpensive compared with newer aircraft offering similar cruise performance? Age is the obvious answer, but it is not the whole story. Many examples are now more than half a century old, and buyers know that the condition of the individual airplane matters enormously. An aircraft with modern avionics, a healthy engine, strong maintenance records, good paint, and a carefully inspected airframe can be a completely different proposition from a cheap example carrying years of deferred maintenance. That is where the bargain can become complicated. The low purchase price may leave room in the budget for upgrades, but it can also hide expensive work involving the landing gear, fuel system, engine, propeller, electrical system, or aging airframe components. The Comanche also faces competition from aircraft that are easier for the average buyer to understand and support. A Cessna 172 is simpler, a Piper Archer is more familiar to many pilots, and newer Mooneys or Bonanzas can offer more modern equipment and greater performance. But the Comanche has something those alternatives cannot completely duplicate: an efficient, proven design with a remarkably strong performance-to-cost ratio when you find a good example. Current asking prices vary widely depending on condition and equipment, with rough or outdated aircraft sometimes appearing well below the price of fully restored examples. That makes shopping carefully more important than simply chasing the lowest number. The Piper Comanche 250 is not cheap because it is ineffective. It is cheap because the airplane is old, the buyer pool is specialized, and bringing a neglected example back to top condition can cost serious money. Find the right aircraft, however, and you can end up with a fast, efficient, and genuinely distinctive cross-country machine that still has plenty of life left in it. Number 12. Cessna 310. Now we move into twin-engine territory, where the difference between a cheap airplane and a cheap airplane to own becomes impossible to ignore. The Cessna 310 was produced from 1954 through 1980, and it became one of the most recognizable light-piston twins in general aviation. What made the 310 stand out was its combination of twin-engine performance, a comfortable cabin, retractable landing gear, and the ability to carry people and baggage over serious cross-country distances. Different versions used different Continental engines, with later models such as the 310R, powered by 285 horsepower Continental engines, while turbocharged variants offered even stronger high-altitude performance. Depending on the model and conditions, the 310 can cruise well above 180 knots, which is still impressive today for an aircraft of this age. Its distinctive engine nacelles and tip tanks also became part of the aircraft's signature appearance, while the twin-engine layout gave it a level of redundancy and utility that single-engine aircraft could not provide. So why can a Cessna 310 become surprisingly cheap? Because the airplane gives you two of almost everything. Two engines, two propellers, two exhaust systems, two sets of accessories, and a retractable landing gear system all have to be inspected and maintained. That does not make the aircraft unreliable, but it does multiply the number of expensive components that can eventually require attention. Fuel consumption is another major factor. Depending on the model and power setting, a 310 can burn roughly 28 to more than 30 gallons per hour, so flying it regularly requires a fuel budget that is dramatically higher than what you would expect from a typical single-engine aircraft. And then there is age. Many 310s have been flying for more than 50 years, which means condition and maintenance history can matter far more than the badge on the nose. A cheap example may need engine work, propeller attention, aging hoses, fuel system maintenance, landing gear repairs, corrosion inspection, or avionics upgrades before it becomes the aircraft the buyer actually wants. The cabin and useful load can still make the 310 extremely attractive for families, business travel, and owners who regularly need more capacity than a single can provide. But for someone flying only a few dozen hours per year, the economics can quickly become difficult to justify. That is the strange appeal of the Cessna 310. The purchase price can fall low enough to make this classic twin look like an incredible bargain, but the operating costs never fall at the same rate. Current asking prices vary enormously depending on the exact model, condition, engines, avionics, and maintenance history, with neglected examples sometimes selling for surprisingly little, while highly upgraded aircraft can command substantially more. So when you see a cheap 310 sitting on the market, the smartest question is not how much it costs to buy. It is how much it will cost to make it reliable, maintain it properly, and keep both engines turning year after year. That is why the Cessna 310 can be an outstanding aircraft at the right price, yet still remain one of the easiest airplanes to underestimate when shopping the used market. Number 11. Piper Seneca II. The Piper PA-34 Tangerine T Seneca II is another aircraft that can look almost unbelievably affordable when you compare its used market price with the amount of capability it offers. Introduced as the second generation of the Seneca family, the Seneca II was designed as a practical light twin with a genuine six-seat cabin, retractable landing gear, and turbocharged Continental engines. Its two Continental LTSEO 360EB engines are rated at 200 horsepower each, giving the aircraft strong climb and cruise performance while allowing it to operate effectively at higher altitudes than many normally aspirated piston singles. Piper's published figures put the Seneca II's maximum level speed at around 198 knots and normal cruise around 191 knots, which is still impressive for an aircraft of this age. But what makes the Seneca II particularly interesting is not simply its speed. The aircraft was designed around practicality. The engines are mounted in conventional nacelles, the cabin provides useful passenger and baggage space, and the twin-engine layout gives it the kind of redundancy that attracted pilots, training organizations, charter operators, and private owners. Yet all of that capability comes with a cost, and that is where the used market becomes interesting. You are not maintaining one engine, you are maintaining two turbocharged engines. You have two propellers, retractable landing gear, multiple engine-driven accessories, and an airframe that may now be several decades old. Turbocharging also adds another layer of systems that need to be inspected and maintained properly, especially on aircraft that have accumulated significant operating time. Fuel consumption is naturally higher than a comparable single, while engine reserves and eventual overhauls can become major expenses. Insurance can also be an important part of the equation, particularly for pilots who are new to multi-engine flying. A buyer might therefore see a Seneca II advertised for a surprisingly low price and think they have found an inexpensive six-seat aircraft, only to discover that the purchase price represents the smallest part of the ownership budget. The condition of the engines, turbochargers, propellers, landing gear, fuel system, exhaust, avionics, and maintenance records can dramatically change the real value of the airplane. On the positive side, a properly maintained Seneca II can still be a very capable cross-country machine. It offers a comfortable cabin, strong useful load capability, respectable speed, and the flexibility of a twin-engine platform without moving into the much larger and more expensive cabin class category. That is why a good Seneca II can be an excellent value when the right airplane is found. The problem is that buyers need to look beyond the low asking price. A rough Seneca can become expensive very quickly, while a well-maintained example with strong engines and complete records may justify a much higher price. Number 10. Cessna 340A. The Cessna 340A is one of those aircraft that can look almost unbelievable when you compare its used market price with what it was designed to do. This is a pressurized, turbocharged, six-seat twin that was built to give private owners and business operators a level of comfort and high-altitude capability that normally came with a much higher price tag. The 340A delivers strong performance while allowing the cabin to remain pressurized at altitude, making long cross-country flights far more comfortable than they would be in a conventional light twin. That pressurization system is one of the aircraft's biggest selling points, because it allows the 340A to operate above much of the weather and traffic that can complicate lower altitude flying. It also gives the airplane a surprisingly sophisticated feel for an aircraft that dates back decades. The low-wing design, retractable landing gear, twin-engine layout, large cabin windows, and business aircraft-style interior all contribute to an airplane that still looks and feels serious. So why can a Cessna 340A become relatively cheap on today's used market? The answer is that the purchase price only tells part of the story. You are buying two engines instead of one, two propellers, turbocharging systems, retractable gear, a pressurization system, and a complex airframe that has now spent decades in service. Every one of those systems can be valuable when it works properly, but every one can also become an expensive maintenance item. A lower-priced example may therefore be attractive because the seller has already accepted that it needs work, while a well-maintained 340A with modern avionics, strong engines, good records, and a healthy pressurization system can command a much higher price. Current listings can vary dramatically, but older examples may appear around the low hundreds of thousands of dollars, while carefully upgraded aircraft can move substantially higher. That wide price range is exactly what makes the 340A interesting. You can potentially get pressurized twin-engine transportation for far less than the cost of a modern aircraft with similar capabilities. The downside is operating cost. Fuel consumption is significant, engine reserves matter twice, and maintaining an aging pressurized twin requires a serious budget. The 340A stands out because it offers an unusual combination of comfort, altitude capability, speed, and redundancy in a package that can now be surprisingly affordable to purchase. But that affordability is only real if the airplane's condition supports it, and the owner can handle the ongoing costs. For someone who flies regularly and genuinely needs a pressurized twin, a good Cessna 340A can be an incredible value. For someone who simply wants a cheap airplane for occasional weekend flights, however, the low purchase price can quickly become a trap, which is exactly why these aircraft can keep getting cheaper while still waiting for the right buyer. Number 9. Beechcraft Baron 58. The Beechcraft Baron 58 is one of those aircraft that can look expensive even after decades in service, because the name still carries a reputation for speed, quality, and serious cross-country capability. Introduced in 1970, the Baron 58 was originally powered by twin 285 horsepower Continental IO 520 engines, while later production aircraft moved to 300 horsepower Continental IO 550C engines. That evolution helped keep the Baron competitive, and the aircraft remains capable of cruising at more than 200 knots in the right configuration, while offering a comfortable 6-seat cabin and the kind of useful load that makes it practical for family travel, business trips, and longer cross-country missions. What makes the Baron 58 particularly interesting on the used market is the amount of capability you can sometimes get for the money. Older examples can occasionally be found in the low hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that may sound surprisingly cheap for a 6-seat high-performance twin. But there is a reason the price can fall. The Baron is not simply a larger version of a single-engine airplane. You are maintaining 2 engines, 2 propellers, retractable landing gear, multiple fuel and electrical systems, and a much more complex airframe. Fuel consumption is also a major part of the equation, especially when the airplane is flown regularly at high power for long-distance travel. Then comes the biggest concern with any aging high-performance twin, the condition of the individual aircraft. A Baron with strong engines, good propellers, modern avionics, complete maintenance records, and a clean inspection history can be a very different proposition from one with high engine time, outdated equipment, corrosion concerns, tired interiors, or years of deferred maintenance. The difference can easily be worth tens of thousands of dollars, and sometimes much more. That is why an attractive asking price should never be viewed as proof that the airplane is a bargain. It may simply reflect the investment required to bring the aircraft back to the standard today's buyers expect. At the same time, this is exactly where the Baron 58 can become extremely interesting. The basic design remains impressive. The low-wing configuration, retractable gear, twin-engine layout, large cabin, and powerful engines give it a combination of speed and utility that many newer aircraft still struggle to match at the same purchase price. The aircraft also has a mature support network and a long operating history, which can make ownership more predictable when you start with a properly maintained example. The downside is that there is no way around the economics of a twin. Engine reserves, propeller work, annual inspections, fuel, insurance, and unexpected repairs all have to be part of the budget. So when an older Baron 58 keeps getting cheaper, the airplane itself may not be losing its value because of poor performance. The market may simply be pricing in the cost and responsibility of owning a decades-old high-performance twin. For an experienced pilot who finds a well-documented example with healthy engines and a strong maintenance history, that can create a genuine opportunity. Number 8. Beechcraft C33A Debonair. The Beechcraft C33A Debonair is one of those aircraft that can look almost forgotten in today's market, yet it still offers a surprisingly serious combination of speed, comfort, and classic Beechcraft engineering for the right buyer. Produced during the 1960s, the C33A belongs to the straight-tail side of the Bonanza family, giving pilots much of the same high-performance philosophy without the distinctive V-tail that attracts so much attention on comparable Bonanzas. Under the cowling is a 285 horsepower Continental IO 520B, giving the airplane strong cross-country capability and making it far more than just an older family cruiser. What makes the C33A especially interesting is how much of its value comes from the design rather than modern technology. The retractable landing gear reduces drag in cruise. The clean, low-wing configuration helps the aircraft move efficiently through the air, and the Beechcraft cabin was designed around a level of comfort and refinement that was impressive for its era. It also benefits from the kind of solid construction that has helped many Beechcraft aircraft remain valuable, decades after leaving the factory. Yet this is exactly where the price becomes interesting. Older C-33As can sometimes be found around the low six-figure range, with actual asking prices varying dramatically depending on avionics, engine time, maintenance records, interior, paint, and upgrades. A well-equipped example with modern glass avionics and a strong engine can command significantly more, while an aircraft that needs refurbishment may be priced far lower simply to attract attention. That makes the C-33A a classic case of buying the airplane, not just the model name. A cheap example may look like a bargain until you discover that the panel is outdated, the interior needs work, the engine is approaching a major expense, or years of maintenance have been deferred. On the other hand, a properly maintained aircraft can offer a remarkable amount of performance for the money. It is fast enough for serious cross-country travel, comfortable enough for longer flights, and mechanically sophisticated enough to feel like a genuine high-performance aircraft rather than an upgraded trainer. The biggest disadvantage is age. Parts availability, maintenance expertise, insurance, and modernization costs all deserve careful consideration, and newer aircraft can offer easier ownership with more contemporary cockpits and systems. But that is also why the C-33A can be overlooked. Buyers who focus only on new interiors and touchscreen avionics may miss an aircraft that still delivers excellent aerodynamics, strong construction, retractable gear efficiency, and classic Beechcraft performance at a fraction of the cost of many newer high-performance singles. For a knowledgeable owner willing to inspect the aircraft carefully and budget for its age, the C33A Debonair can be one of those rare used aircraft opportunities where the airplane is much more capable than its price tag initially suggests. Number 7. Piper Comanche 400. This may be one of the strangest aircraft on the entire list, because the Piper Comanche 400 was never just a more powerful version of an ordinary Comanche. It was built as a high-performance touring aircraft and produced in very limited numbers, which immediately made it something of a collector's airplane. Under the cowling is a massive Lycoming IO 720 8-cylinder engine, giving the Comanche 400 a level of power that was almost excessive for a single-engine aircraft of its era. That is also what makes this airplane so fascinating today. The Comanche 400 was designed around speed, and even after all these decades, it can still deliver impressive cross-country performance. Its sleek, low-wing design, retractable landing gear, long fuselage, and clean aerodynamic shape help it move through the air much more efficiently than its age might suggest. The airplane also has the distinctive character of a classic high-performance Piper, with a strong airframe and a cockpit designed around serious traveling rather than basic training. On the used market, a Comanche 400 can sometimes appear surprisingly affordable compared with newer high-performance singles, and that is where the story gets interesting. The low purchase price is not necessarily a reflection of poor performance. In many cases, it reflects how specialized the airplane has become. The biggest challenge is the engine. The IO 720 is unusual, and maintaining a rare power plant can require more research, more patience, and access to mechanics who understand the aircraft. Parts availability and long-term support also matter more when you are dealing with such a limited production airplane. Fuel consumption is another obvious disadvantage. The Comanche 400 was never designed to be a fuel-sipping aircraft, because the entire concept was built around delivering strong performance. That makes it very different from the typical economical four-seat single. But there is a major advantage on the other side of the equation. If you find a properly maintained example, you can get remarkable speed, a useful touring cabin, retractable gear, and a huge amount of character without paying the price of a modern high-performance aircraft. That combination is exactly why enthusiasts continue to appreciate the Comanche 400. It is fast, distinctive, rare, and mechanically fascinating. The downside is that the same rarity that makes it desirable also limits the number of potential buyers. Someone looking for simple transportation may choose a more common Comanche or another mainstream single. Someone wanting modern avionics and newer technology has countless newer options. But for an experienced owner who understands vintage aircraft and wants something genuinely different, the Comanche 400 can be an incredible opportunity. It is not cheap because it lacks capability. It can be cheap because very few buyers are willing to accept the responsibility that comes with owning such a rare and specialized airplane. Number 6. The Piper Cherokee 6300. The Piper Cherokee 6300 is one of those airplanes that can look almost too good for the money, especially when you compare what it offers with the prices of newer aircraft. Built as the PA-32-300, it was designed around a simple but very useful idea. Give pilots a spacious cabin, strong load-carrying ability, 6 seats, and the practicality to handle missions that would overwhelm a typical 4-seat single. Its 300 horsepower Lycoming IO 540K gives the aircraft plenty of power, while the fixed landing gear keeps the design relatively straightforward compared with retractable high-performance singles. But the real selling point is not speed, it is versatility. The Cherokee Six can carry a family, luggage, camping equipment, or other gear without forcing the pilot to make the kind of compromises that are common in smaller aircraft. That makes it particularly attractive for owners who actually use all of that space. The large cabin is one of the airplane's biggest advantages, and the baggage area is another reason the Cherokee Six has remained popular with pilots who need practical transportation rather than just a fast personal aircraft. But this is also where the airplane's biggest weakness appears. Most private pilots simply do not need this much airplane. If you normally fly alone or with one passenger, a large 6-seat cabin can become expensive space that you rarely use. The big engine also means higher fuel consumption than smaller singles, while the aircraft's performance does not necessarily satisfy buyers who are primarily looking for speed. That puts the Cherokee Six in an unusual position on the used market. A buyer focused on low operating costs can choose a smaller aircraft, while a buyer focused on cross-country speed may start looking at retractable singles, such as the Bonanza or Mooney. The Cherokee Six is strongest when the mission demands capacity. Load it with people and baggage, and the airplane suddenly makes a lot more sense. Fly it mostly empty, and the financial argument becomes much harder to defend. That is one reason older Cherokee Six aircraft can sometimes experience significant price reductions without suddenly attracting a huge number of buyers. The low price may look appealing, but experienced shoppers know that buying the airplane is only part of the equation. Fuel, maintenance, insurance, engine reserves, avionics, and the overall condition of an aging airframe still matter. The Cherokee Six is not cheap because it lacks capability. It can be cheap because the number of pilots who genuinely need all that capability is relatively small. For the right owner, that can make it an outstanding value. Instead of paying for speed or luxury, you are getting something far more useful. A proven airplane that can carry a lot of people and a lot of stuff without making every trip feel like a logistical puzzle. Number 5. The Cessna 182 Skylane. This is one of those airplanes that proves a strong reputation does not always guarantee an easy sale. The Cessna 182 has been one of the most respected 4-seat aircraft in general aviation for generations, and there is a good reason for that. It offers a practical combination of useful load, dependable performance, cabin comfort, and straightforward handling that makes it suitable for everything from weekend trips to serious cross-country flying. The modern Skylane continues that philosophy with a 230 horsepower Lycoming engine, but older examples can be especially interesting when their prices begin to fall. The key is understanding why the airplane is getting cheaper. A low-priced 182 is rarely cheap simply because the design has become obsolete. More often, the price reflects the condition of that particular aircraft. An older example may have outdated avionics, worn paint, an aging interior, significant engine time, or maintenance items that the previous owner decided not to address immediately. None of those things automatically make the aircraft unsafe or undesirable, but they can turn an attractive asking price into a much larger ownership project. This is where the 182 becomes interesting for buyers who know what they are looking at. The basic design is proven, parts and maintenance knowledge are widely available, and the airplane remains useful in a way that many older aircraft cannot match. It has enough cabin space for a small family, enough baggage capacity for real trips, and the performance to make cross-country flying practical without moving into a much more complicated class of aircraft. Another major advantage is its versatility. The 182 is equally comfortable as a personal transportation aircraft, a family touring airplane, or a platform for pilots who want more capability than a 172 without stepping into a high-performance retractable single. But there are downsides, especially with older examples. Bringing an aging 182 up to modern standards can require a serious investment in avionics, engine work, interior refurbishment, paint, or other maintenance. Buyers also need to look beyond the cosmetics and examine the records carefully. A shiny exterior can hide expensive problems, while a less attractive airplane with excellent maintenance history can sometimes be the better purchase. That is why a Cessna 182 can become cheaper and still sit on the market. The airplane itself is not necessarily losing its value because it is a poor performer. The market is often pricing in the work that the next owner may have to do, and if that future investment becomes too large, buyers may decide that paying more for a better equipped example makes more sense. For someone willing to inspect carefully and choose the right aircraft, however, an older Skylane can still offer tremendous value. You are not buying cutting-edge technology, but you are getting a proven platform with a reputation for doing exactly what a practical personal aircraft is supposed to do. Number 4. The Piper Saratoga. This is one of those aircraft where the name can cover more than one configuration, but the basic idea remains the same: a large 6-seat Piper designed to give private pilots serious carrying capability without moving into twin-engine territory. The Saratoga evolved from the PA-32 Cherokee Six family, and that heritage is easy to see in the spacious cabin, generous baggage capacity, and practical layout. Fixed-gear Saratoga models focus on simplicity and utility, while the Saratoga SP adds retractable landing gear and more emphasis on cross-country performance. There were also turbocharged versions, so the exact performance and ownership experience depends heavily on the individual aircraft. What makes the Saratoga interesting on the used market is how much airplane you can get for the money. A well-maintained example can carry a family, luggage, and equipment in a way that makes smaller 4-seat singles feel cramped. The cabin is one of its biggest strengths, and the large engine gives it enough power to remain useful even when the aircraft is loaded. For family travel, longer trips, or owners who regularly need additional capacity, that can be a major advantage. But there is a reason some Saratogas can become surprisingly affordable. The average private pilot simply does not need this much airplane. If most flights involve only 1 or 2 people, paying for a 6-seat cabin, a larger engine, and the additional fuel required to operate it may not make much sense. The retractable versions add another layer of complexity because the landing gear system requires additional inspection and maintenance compared with a fixed-gear aircraft. Fuel consumption is also part of the equation. A large Lycoming engine delivers the power the Saratoga needs, but it cannot provide that performance at the operating cost of a small trainer. This puts the Saratoga in an unusual position between simpler family aircraft and faster high-performance singles. Buyers looking for low operating costs can choose something smaller, while pilots who prioritize speed may start looking toward aircraft such as the Bonanza or Mooney. The Saratoga's real advantage appears when the mission requires capacity rather than maximum speed. Fill the seats, load the baggage, and the airplane starts to make a lot more sense. Fly it mostly empty, and that extra capability becomes an expense rather than an advantage. Another important factor is the condition of older examples. Avionics, engine time, paint, interior, landing gear components, and maintenance records can make 2 seemingly similar Saratogas worth very different amounts. A low asking price may therefore represent an opportunity, but it can also reflect a significant future investment. That is why the Saratoga can keep getting cheaper without suddenly becoming easy to sell. It is not lacking capability. If anything, it has more capability than many buyers need. For the right owner, that can make it a very practical bargain, especially when compared with newer aircraft offering similar cabin space and useful load at a much higher purchase price. Number 3. The Cessna 206 Stationair. If there is one airplane that perfectly demonstrates the difference between capability and demand, this is it. The 206 was never designed simply to be a comfortable personal aircraft. It was built around utility, And that philosophy is still one of its greatest strengths. Over the years, Cessna 206s have been used for passenger transportation, cargo work, sightseeing, charter operations, remote area flying, and private travel. The design is intentionally practical, with a large cabin, plenty of room for baggage, strong load-carrying ability, and the kind of rugged reputation that comes from years of real-world use. That makes a good 206 incredibly valuable to the right owner. If you regularly carry several passengers, bulky equipment, or a serious amount of baggage, the airplane can do things that smaller singles simply cannot. It is also this practical design that makes the 206 stand out from many of its competitors. Instead of chasing extreme speed or a luxurious cabin, the aircraft focuses on getting people and equipment where they need to go. But that same strength can become a weakness in the used market. Most private pilots do not regularly need all of that capacity. If your normal flight involves one passenger and a couple of bags, much of the 206's biggest advantage is simply sitting unused. You are still paying for a large airframe, a powerful engine, and the fuel required to move all that capability through the air. Older examples create another issue that buyers cannot afford to ignore. Many Cessna 206s have spent their lives working rather than sitting in a hangar. That does not automatically make one a bad aircraft, but it means the maintenance history becomes extremely important. An aircraft that has spent years carrying passengers, equipment, or cargo may have experienced considerably more wear than a privately owned airplane that flew only occasionally. Engine condition, airframe history, corrosion, landing gear, previous repairs, and the quality of the maintenance records can all have a major effect on the real value of the aircraft. This is why a surprisingly cheap 206 should never be judged by its asking price alone. A low price might represent a genuine opportunity, but it might also reflect years of deferred maintenance or expensive work waiting for the next owner. The modern Stationair HD shows how relevant the basic concept remains today, combining the same utility-focused philosophy with modern equipment and a turbocharged power plant. But older 2006s can offer something completely different, a proven utility aircraft at a fraction of the price of a new one. That is where the value becomes interesting. If you actually need the space and load-carrying ability, an older 206 can be an incredible tool. If you do not, it can become an expensive solution to a problem you never had. And that is exactly why the price can keep falling while the airplane continues to wait for the right buyer. Number 2. The Beechcraft V35B Bonanza. This is one of the most recognizable high-performance aircraft in general aviation, and the distinctive V-tail is probably the first thing anyone notices. Produced during the later years of the classic V-tail Bonanza era, the V35B combined a powerful Continental engine with retractable landing gear, a comfortable cabin, and the aerodynamic design that made the Bonanza famous for long-distance personal transportation. What makes this airplane especially interesting today is that its age does not necessarily translate into outdated performance. A well-maintained V35B can still provide the kind of speed, comfort, and cross-country capability that many pilots want from a serious personal aircraft. The clean, low-wing design, retractable gear, and efficient airframe allow it to cover long distances without looking or feeling like a much older airplane. That is a major reason enthusiasts continue to seek out good examples. But the V35B also has one of the most complicated reputations in the used aircraft market. The V-tail has been discussed and debated for decades, and some buyers simply feel uncomfortable with the design before they even inspect the aircraft. Experienced Bonanza pilots tend to look at the situation differently. They know that the condition of the individual airplane, its maintenance history, and the quality of the inspection matter far more than the reputation attached to the tail. That becomes especially important when an older V35B is advertised at a surprisingly low price. The airplane may look like a bargain, but the buyer needs to understand what that price is actually telling them. An aging engine, outdated avionics, worn interior, landing gear work, corrosion, previous repairs, or incomplete maintenance records can quickly turn a cheap Bonanza into a very expensive project. This is one of the biggest disadvantages of buying an older, high-performance aircraft. The purchase price may be low, but the systems do not become simpler just because the airplane is old. In fact, an aging retractable aircraft can require more attention as components reach the end of their service life. On the positive side, a properly maintained V35B can offer extraordinary value. You are getting a proven touring aircraft with strong performance, a comfortable cabin, and the cabin